Why have I quit my job? Why have I, bought a van? And why am I going to drive around the country? Well, I'm passionate about the idea that you need to be heard. And I want to stitch these stories together across the states. We're going to find the commonalities, and it's going to be really an amazing experience, and I look forward to you joining me on the Jar. Hey everybody, welcome back to Mental Health Today. I am your host, Ken Stearns, and this is a great little show that we've put together where we really do talk about all things mental health, and really from the what are we doing to kind of help fix the crisis kind of approach. Saw my little commercial there. That was me with the Jar podcast where I started out. I've been traveling around the country. I'm in Moab right now. Just finished a face-to-face show. Really great stuff, talking just about life stuff. And in those conversations, I heard so many mental health stories, the challenges people have had, that it got me inspired to start this dialogue. And really to meet people, the wonderful people around the country and around the world. We've had quite a few people from different countries, what they're doing in the space. What are they doing to kind of help the crisis? And quite often, too, it includes a personal story. And Jessica's our guest today. And, Jessica, thanks for being super flexible on the time. I really appreciate that. And I really look forward to kind of hearing your story. It's great. You look younger than me. Everybody looks younger than me. But, you look really, you look like you're in a great space to be in this mental health space at your age, and to kind of, you'll have a different perspective, I think, than a lot of people, because it may be normal for you at this level. And for me, it's caught me by surprise that there's this much of a crisis going on. And so, Jessica, welcome to the show. And maybe you can give the audience a little background on yourself and what your little journey was to get you in here.
All right. Well, thanks, Ken. I'm happy to be here. So my name is Jessica Langenhan. I'm a board-certified psychiatrist, board-certified in adult psychiatry, but actually kind of speaking to the crisis and the need for mental health, I actually treat children and adolescents as well. So I've kind of have expanded out my age group just based on need, and I feel comfortable treating kids. Kids and parents seem to like me, so I just kind of rolled with it. Currently, I'm actually seeing everybody through telehealth. So my clinical practice is 100% telehealth. I've done a lot of in-person work in the past in different levels of private practice, inpatient, partial hospitalization type programs and things like that. And kind of with a string of everything, just life, schedule, pandemic, of course, everything, it just kind of evolved that telehealth is where I feel I'm the most productive and effective. I can reach the most amount of people. I'm licensed in different states, so I can see people. I'm in California, but I can see people in North Carolina, just as an example. So really just kind of trying to open up my accessibility to people in that respect.
How did you get in? How did you fall into it? Was this just something, your mom and dad said you should be a psychiatrist, or you? How did it happen?
I still remember the level of anxiety I had when I told my parents that that's what I was deciding to do. Because really no one, I think I have so many patients where everyone's like, well, in my culture, in my family, we don't talk about mental health. And I'm like, that crosses all lines, because it doesn't matter what color you are, how old you are, whatever. I feel like everyone has that feeling for the most part. So I actually went to medical school thinking I was going to be a pediatrician of some sort. And then I don't know. I'm like, I like kids, but it was a little too much. And the parents were actually even more than too much.
That would give me mental health issues if I was a pediatrician, just dealing with mom and dad.
Yeah, and I feel like when you go through a lot of the other medical specialties, you catch up, people are dealing with their mental health issues. So I'm like, I might as well just be in the field where I can actually do something about it, rather than note it in the chart and pass it on to somebody else.
Yes.
And then just doing my psychiatry rotations, because they have you do kind of like the main core clerkships and things. I just really liked it. It just seemed to kind of fit. And I actually did my pediatric rotation after that. And then I'm like, no, let's go back to psychiatry. But it wasn't anything. My parents definitely did not pushed me in the direction of
Yeah.
psychiatry. It was
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
it was a new one for them.
Yeah. It's more like my joke, because how do people fall into psychiatry, right? Y- 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 it's an interesting field, and it's not one that's been portrayed on TV as heroic. It's not been portrayed on TV as some great person. Usually it's a little dark, right? I quite often still on TV, it's kind of presented at least gray, but they're not the white hats running around saving people.
Yeah, they don't have too many like psych ER, shows on at 10
Yeah,
o'clock at
yeah,
night or
yeah.
whatever. And yeah, and a lot of times I don't know. I feel like the psychiatrist awards always portrayed as like the nerdy male with like the dark
Yeah,
glasses, clipboard.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Smoking a pipe and laying on the
exactly.
the I mean, these stereotypes, it's great because they're being obviously blown up. And I think now one of the things that's been a kind of an education part for me through this was talking about the earnings that people could make in the business before COVID, and even a physical practice, the challenges of a physical practice, economically, time wise, and everything especially for somebody starting out. And then having a chance to visit with some younger therapists who are just not young, because you're not young when you get out really, but starting out, and they're starting out almost immediately straight into telehealth. They're all virtual, not all, but they have some of these are virtual practices, and they're just kind of growing. And once you get the administrative side down, it seems like you can start to grow a little bit if that's what you want to do. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting.
No, and there's definitely, because I've been, like I said, I've been in a few different private practices, and
Hmm.
it's the administrative struggles with it that can be the biggest. It's like the patients, they're
Yeah.
fine, whatever, I can deal with them, but it's kind of the management and finding a front desk staff that you can trust and things. So yeah, telemedicine, all of that gets erased.
Yeah, and it's interesting that now you can earn a living doing this. And just talking to people before, it seemed like, man, if you were a therapist and you were a young therapist starting out, not easy to make ends meet, to pay all your bills and to run a practice. And I think it's great that we're finally getting some good reimbursements and probably getting better rates, and a lot more recognition for the work you do.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very valid point. And then the whole thing with parity with insurances, where basically
Yes.
insurance companies have to treat it equally to medical problems, so they can't, shortchange basically the mental health side of someone's benefits.
Hmm.
I think made a huge difference. Yeah, just in terms of reimbursement and things. Because yeah, everyone, you have to earn a living. You can love what you do, but if it's not paying the bills, then you might have to rethink things.
Yeah, and I think that was some of the messages that came through, from other interviews. The struggle before, the before and after. And one of those conversations was coming actually from kind of a headhunter, somebody that's in
Okay,
the business, and it's a headhunter, and they were really in the detail, right? They saw the real numbers,
right.
and on a kind of a broader scale, and just their excitement that, man, we got, and saying so many young women coming into the space, just because it's a place where the skills are kind of natural. It's
Yeah, exactly.
it's just kind of, and now that you can make money and you can do it remotely, so it's flexible, it can fit inside people's schedules. Um, it's great stuff right now. I feel like we're in a good spot, uh, it, at least from the maturity of delivering better options for clients.
Yeah, and I mean, from my perspective, I think that's one thing good that came out of the pandemic was
Yeah.
people's ability, because even just comparing, so I've been doing some form of telemedicine since like mid 2018 is when I kind
Okay.
of opened up that part of my practice. And I've been with the same telehealth company since, but comparing like my earning potentials before the pandemic versus
Yes.
like I think I almost like tripled my earnings in 1 month, like that March after the pandemic, after
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
everything shut down, just like looking, because I kind of track all my things. And then just like because I could have hours on my schedule and they wouldn't necessarily all get filled. Then once the pandemic came, every hour, every minute I offered got filled. And so,
Wow.
and it's continued, even though a lot of things are open back up and people are offering, a lot of people do a hybrid thing where they might have a private practice, but then do telepsych as well. So a lot of people, I think, have just kind of stuck with it because the convenience. I mean, I see people at 9 o'clock at night, they put the kids to bed and then they jump on for their call and we check in about their meds. Like I mentioned, kind of seeing people on different coasts, both heading west and east of me. It's, yeah, the flexibility of it is just amazing.
Oh, and that's clever. You've got clients on the East Coast as well. So
Right. Yeah.
yeah, that really helps your time as well, right?
Exactly. I mean, there are some people who are like the early birds, and so they're in
Yeah,
California and take my 7 a.m. appointments, and then some of
yeah,
them are in North Carolina, and they're like, "Oh, it's 10 for me. This is perfect." So,
yeah, that's really good. Have you or what is or have you seen a shift in what people are talking about, the kind of the top of mind struggles, since the pandemic or the change, after as the pandemic's kind of waning now, and I don't know what people would have triggered, not triggered, but really brought them to see somebody, right? What would during that pandemic, the things that are just too much. And now there's a different set of challenges, right? A lot of that stuff was kind of environmental in a
right.
way,
Yeah.
and it triggers these things and either memories, past things they've dealt with, and they want to talk to somebody because it's bringing up some things. But it's an external kind of environmental thing very heavily. And now we're mostly now back to our own thoughts, right? We're not getting there's no more COVID fear porn, and if the fear porn is gone, are people getting better, or are they using this as an opportunity to find other ways to kind of other things to heal?
Yeah, I mean, and that's, I think, a very interesting question. I kind of have seen like multiple things. First, like I think going
Yeah,
into the pandemic, there were a lot of people who may have been like kind of on the cusp of their
yeah,
depression and anxiety, being like, it's not great, but I can manage. I go to yoga, I do other things, and then shut down, and that all just kind of went
yeah,
over. Exactly. It's interesting now because I am seeing some anxiety and issues with people returning back to normal life. Like a lot of people
yes,
got very used to the work from home
yeah,
situation. They don't want to deal with the office politics, the boss breathing down their neck, whatever it is, and just kind of that going back and feeling like they're forced to go back because some offices are saying you have to
oh
do at
yeah,
least three days a week or whatever the deal is. So I think, and also just maybe like higher pressures to perform. Like there's no more of this excuse, that, oh, things are going to take 6 months because of COVID. Like we need to get back on the ball. So I kind of am seeing almost anxiety because of those types of issues.
oh, so it is the back to normal.
Yes, because I think a lot of people, and and again, even like for kids, the kids who hated school or worked on the shy kid, for them, school from home, that's great. Again, I don't have to deal with like the peer pressure, the bullying,
Yeah.
whatever else. I'm just going to sit here and be on my laptop and switch between playing games and doing my English homework or whatever. Great. Um, I think the other thing I've seen a lot of is adult ADHD, and again, whether that's something that people just notice because it was so hard concentrating just for everyone, I think, at home,
Hmm.
during the pandemic, and then it maybe not necessarily improving or them just being more aware of those types of symptoms with returning to work or having to juggle multiple things again. But that's, again, I'm very comfortable treating ADHD, so I don't know if they're kind of drawn to me because that's part of my profile and referred by therapists and things like that. But definitely the ADHD has been another kind of like big big theme in a lot of my patients.
Interesting. I mean, if before, as you talk to people, and that's kind of coming across as maybe a diagnosis, and you're kind of playing with that. Because this is so prevalent. I mean, even myself, like I don't know what kind of test there is or anything else. I'm sure I'm a lifelong, some iteration of ADHD. Uh, what techniques are you, and how do you do that when you do find somebody? Are you giving some techniques for them to play with, or to kind of manage it? Because you don't want to get them on. I'm guessing Ritalin is not that's the last answer. What's before that, and what's just kind of what you're feeling on this, because it's a popular.
Right, and that's the other thing. Like, I'm not sure also how much like TikTok and whatever else, all the ADHD experts on there, how much that's
Yes,
contributing to this. And again, more people are just talking about it. Um,
right.
And it's interesting because there are some, I mean, it's definitely a spectrum, like with anything
Yeah.
in mental health, you know, in terms of the severity and things. And I have some patients who come to me who really feel that it's affecting their function, like they just can't, they need medications, they want
Hmm.
medications. And we do still use Ritalin. It's one of the stimulants. The stimulants are kind
Works.
of like, yeah, it's that Adderall, Vyvanse, you know, they're all kind of all similar, all stimulants in that respect.
Yeah, Adderall was the one I was maybe thinking about.
That's yeah, that's it's interesting though, because on telehealth, most telehealth practices don't allow us to do controlled prescriptions since the stimulants are
Yeah, yeah,
considered. So I
sure.
actually have to kind of work out a thing where I write like a consultation letter, and the patient then takes that to like their face to face, like a primary care doctor usually, and
Yeah.
that person's kind of like the scribe. And most of the times they're agreeable with it. They just want someone else to have kind of rubber stamped the diagnosis and the recommendations. Um, but to kind of the answer on the other side, there are patients who don't want to be on medications, whether
Yes.
they've been on in the past or some people just don't like medications. I totally get that. And so they're kind of like time management techniques, just kind of, I think a lot of times it's being aware of what the issue is, because sometimes, like, you know, it'll be a spouse whose their wife told them that they need an ADHD evaluation. So they're not even like aware that these are the things that they're doing, right? So sometimes just having the diagnosis and saying, this is what the diagnosis is. It isn't just the 5-year-old who's bouncing off the
Yeah.
walls in the kindergarten class. Like there's many other components to ADHD, some that aren't even like delineated specifically in our diagnostic criteria, and just kind of being aware, like more self-aware of those things and how it's affecting their life and the lives of others around them. I think that's a huge first step right there. There are actually people who work as ADHD coaches. Like I have resources I provide patients that they can look up and find like an
Wow.
ADHD. So almost like you go to like a trainer, you know, at the
Yeah,
gym,
yeah.
or like a job coach if you're looking for to switch your career or something. This is an ADHD coach who kind of works through, you know, how do you frame your day and what are little things that
Right.
you can do, kind of tricks and things that you can insert into your day to make the ADHD symptoms at least more within a man. And that's really a good recommendation. Even if you're taking the medication, you never want to like say the medication's doing 100% of the job, because we don't are just our medications are not that good. You know, I mean, we have to be realistic.
Yeah, and also just, I mean, it's if sometimes it ends up being a thing you do for a long time because it just becomes it becomes more than a crutch, right?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, medicines are something I hope I don't have to take for a lifetime. But you know, the reality is sometimes you do. But
It's
how,
yeah.
but how to avoid the starting it, delay, you know, like can you push the start date back? Can I push the amount down? Are there techniques I can use to kind of help self-control it? Or but I like what you said about being aware is probably the most important part.
Yeah, exactly. And especially because ADHD carries a lot of, again, kind of like preconceived notions and a lot of like
Mm,
kind of baggage with it. Um,
yes.
because and for the longest time, a lot of times females were told that they don't have ADHD because it presents differently in them. So there was this like, oh, it's more prevalent in boys, where it was just diagnosed more in guys versus it actually being prevalence discrepancy.
Yeah. Well, you know, I kind of laugh sometimes at that thing of, you know, putting 8-year-old boys in classrooms and strapping them to chairs for 5 hours. Like there's not a more, I'm sorry, but there's not a more retarded, you know, like, and that's a wrong word. There's not a dumber idea on the, like, and then they bounce around the rooms. They must have a problem.
Exactly. Well, it's funny because so my sister and I, we're the two oldest, and my brother's the youngest of the three of us, right? So my
Okay.
sister and I, we were in school, we did fine, we do what we told, whatever, right? My brother
Yeah.
comes along, my parents are pulling out every trick in the bag to like basically bribe him to like sit there and do his home. And I remember getting so upset because I'm like, well, I didn't get all this stuff. I just went to school and did what I was supposed to. And my dad, I still remember, he's like the whole carrot and the string, whatever analogy.
Right. He's
Like,
trying.
we
He's
have to put
trying.
something, I have to put something before him because school is just not what he wants to do.
I mean, it's a real thing, right? Like we need to, you know, boys need to be run around the yard, you know, about 2 hours a day on,
Yeah.
you know, because they just have little engines and they're just going to go, go, go. Um, yeah, I don't know. So I can't tell if that was me as a kid or not, but I do get that giggle of that thought of, you know, they must have ADHD because they can't sit in the chair.
Right, exactly.
And then even, and that would be, I mean, that's that obvious kind of diagnosis thing, right? Where you're looking, there's a issue, something's there, and it's like, oh, it might be this. But you're right. For women, for girls, totally does not present. You know, you don't have that same thing. So how can they be ADHD?
Right, and that's been like the prevailing thing. But the girls do tend to be more of like the daydreamers. So they're sitting, but they're not really causing a problem. And they might even look like they're paying attention, if they're in like a classroom.
Yeah.
But they're kind of looking at what's going out the window. They're doodling. They're have a conversation going on in their head, whatever it is. But again, they're not really causing problems because they're quiet and at least doing something.
That's funny. Yeah. So the boys are showing all kinds of symptoms, different stuff, just being, being a boy, being a kid. Um, what I was going to ask you too, back to that kind of change of, change of what you're seeing in the patients. How about, so the workers are feeling this kind of pressure to go back, also the pressure of getting back to normal.
Right.
I mean, this is an interesting thing. I don't know, what is that? Are people going to be able to get back? I mean, from the mind, from the psychological part, maybe you use some of your schooling and stuff. What happened? Because we broke, we had this very normal idea what it meant to work. You go to office, you get dressed, you put on your stuff. I'd put on my monkey suit, and they go downtown, and all of a sudden, all of that is gone, and I'm in my my jammies and my slippers all day, and I may realize I haven't even showered by 2 days, and now you're supposed to be going back to the office and behaving like back to normal and deliver stuff, and the pressure. Are people going to be able to relate to this? Because there's no pressure, and now it's face to face. Your boss is saying, Jessica, you got to get this by Friday. There's really no excuses. The client's waiting. I need this done by Friday. And we haven't had that in a long time.
Yeah, exactly. And again, part of it was like, well, things are going to take longer because of supplies and whatever.
Next month is fine. The client will understand. No, nobody understands now. It's back. We got to go.
Yeah. And I do feel that there's like it's almost maybe like an inertia almost of just like how, like why that they can't get back. Because again, like even
Yes.
And I'm talking to someone who's like, he kind of has like people below him, and they're like, there's this big like complaint, like people are complaining because they have to come back to the office X number of days again.
Yes.
It's like there's just this resistance to it. And then part of it too is I think we found out that there are some things or a lot of things maybe that we can do remote. And so people then kind of use that as like, even for instance, they were talking, so my other job is actually in health insurance. So I kind of have split jobs, but people were talking about, well, are you going to go back to the office? And everyone's like, well, we'll go back to the office, and everyone's on Zoom. Like all our meetings are like on Microsoft Teams anyway. So because there are people from different parts of the country, we're like a national company, right? So why go to an office to just be sitting there by myself when I can do that at home in my pajamas with the cat and all of these other things, right? So, and then not having to commute, I mean, cutting down just on the environmental effects, the cost of gas, like I can see there's good arguments even separate from mental health that I think are contributing to it and kind of bolstering up people's like resistance, I guess.
Yeah. So I guess, does this bring the next wave? I mean, for you, as far as a clinician, I guess if that's the right word, what are you going to see differently as, because these are now changing, right? Now the behavior, now it was this COVID thing before, it was the regulations, and, you got to comply, and now it's going to be, now you're going to be dealing with real work pressure. People are going to be having to say, do I want this job anymore? Because they're asking me to do this. I've got to decide where's my mental health? Do I need the paycheck, or do I need a different job? Are you seeing this happen yet, or?
I think we're probably at least heading in that direction. I think as people kind of collect themselves, because it's true, like after any major like trauma or life event, that is oftentimes when people have this kind of like reset button, and they're like, well, do I still want to work in this job that I really have not been very fond of, for 30 years or whatever. So, I mean, and it was really just like a worldwide trauma. People were affected at different degrees of it. But if we look at it that way, I think it has made a lot of people just kind of take restock of where they are and where they want to be.
Yeah, it's I think it's going to be very interesting to see what does come, as far as people's careers and how they look at everything, because there is a lot of, I share a short side story. I was in San Francisco. It was probably about January, February last year. So the COVID was just we were just kind of on the kind of halfway down that slope, right? It was pretty much wiped out, and everything was kind of, slowly getting back to, not really back to normal. We were still masking up, and they were still showing, I guess, I think back now, actually, they were still showing IDs, and you had to show your vax card and a license card in San Francisco to get into a bar or a restaurant.
Right.
So just that very strange, that's a psychological thing right there. And this taxi driver, the Uber guy, he looked around and he said, this town is dead. It doesn't know it yet, but the city's died. And we're like, what do you mean? And he was showing, and he was saying, look at all these buildings. It's 4:00 on a Friday. These things should be lit up. And there's nobody in these buildings. And he's like, you're never going to get everybody back. Like and this is an Uber driver. He's, he's a mainland China guy. He's been in the country about 7 years, driving an Uber the whole time. And he's like, I'm leaving San Francisco because it's dead. But, so this is this great, I think we'll look back and there'll be some real human studies, some sociology studies on, the effect of what we did to ourselves by locking ourselves away. Kind of that us versus, you versus the other person, at the vaccine situation, and just the very strange arbitrary rules from city to city, state to state. And, man, it's got to affect people's mental health as well, that we'll see coming up.
And what I thought was really interesting too, almost kind of getting back to like what you spoke about with like the cards, showing the cards, is that it did put certain people almost like in this weird like position of power, right?
Oh,
like
yeah.
I remember my mom talking about like the lady at TJ Maxx, like the woman who worked there, who was like only 5 people could go in the store at the time, and she was like this like kind of guard at the store, and I'm like, why are we having this conversation in front of a TJ Maxx, right? But it is interesting because there have been psychological studies of like putting people in power, and
yes,
they rise up to it.
They rise up to it.
Exactly. Whatever that means. So
yes.
So that was I think very interesting dichotomy as well of kind of that power struggle almost, or that argument over whether you have the right card to show or whether you've been vaccinated the right number of times and all of that.
And it's in the righteousness of it, and there's a lot of, you can almost go back to kind of Christian, being Christianity, and back, when you were a dirty person and you did something wrong, it's a very interesting way that it wasn't religion, but it's still this societal kind of compliance thing that was applied. It's very, the psychological impact on that's got to be something.
Yeah, no, I think there's the past few years are just going to have, I think, ripple effects. I think it's now like in our psyche of what, and just having survived it, and kind of lived to tell it type thing. I don't know. It might be a bit of an exaggeration, but it's almost like people who lived through like World War II, and they would talk about like during the wartime,
yes.
That type of thing. Like, I do, we were in that that weird hunker down situation.
I do think, well, hey man, we were all scared. The facts were not real clear.
Right.
It was a scary, super scary disease. And certainly, like I said, the fear stuff was really amped up because that sells. And, the more it sells, the more people get fearful, that you just kind of jack it up a little bit more. And it's just it's a bad cycle, right? Of just really almost being, I think, really a bit of terrorizing, right? I think we were terrorized in our own way. We did it to ourselves and everything, humans to humans. But yeah, I think the ripple effect is going to be quite interesting over the next few years to see.
Yeah, no, definitely.
What's the impact on kids? Are they resilient in this scenario, or is it going to affect some versus others? How do you think it plays out on kids, what we did?
Yeah, I think part of it has to do with how parents or the people around them handle the situation.
Okay. Good point. Very good.
I do think kind of what environment they were like. And some parents didn't have a choice. Like they had to work. They kind of had to put the kid away, watch them under the babysitter and just do your
Yeah.
schoolwork and be done. Others made it more of like, let's be adventuresome and we're going to go out on hikes since we can't really do anything else. So,
Hmm.
people had kind of different choices. I think the age something means a lot as well. Like, I really felt, even like in the midst of the pandemic, the kids who were born during that time or who were kind of in that age, the young 1 to 2 year olds who were developing like social skills. I mean, they didn't see
Yeah.
people's mouths and smiles other than like the people in their house because everyone else was masked up. So just
Yeah.
even being able to like that facial recognition and kind of the
Yes.
social smiles and all of that, like I think I think they are seeing delays or kind of stiltedness in that. Just because they didn't get that just natural social interaction. Usually a baby's born and the relatives descend on the house, and everybody's there and helping
Yeah.
everybody. And this, it's like, no, stay 6 feet away and all this other stuff. And then again, kind of like even like the kids who didn't like school and were anxious about it, for them, it was fine. It was great. I don't have to go. The kids who get a stomach ache every day before school, they didn't have a problem with it. And again, it was returning to school that was an issue. Whereas some more social kids, a lot of them they got depressed. They didn't care about school. They're like, what's the point of this? So,
Hmm.
and I think and it's also recovering from, because I'm sorry, these at home kind of ad hoc schools that were created, they're not going to be as good or as quality as what you're doing like face to face, right? So I think just like educational delays and having to catch up, and
Oh, yeah.
that pressure, especially for kids who are maybe on the cusp of going to college and all of that. So
That'll be a real thing too. That'll be a real thing. Um, yeah, I forgot about that. The actual really not learning. Well, and that goes, as you said that, only thing I could, not the only thing, but the thing that was ringing in my ear was the boss saying, actually, we need to be in the office because we're more productive. And I mean, the reality is you got to be faced to, maybe not more productive, but the development of ideas and strategies and the teamwork and feel of belonging and a sense of contribution to community and everything else, that teamwork. And if you're not together, you don't have any of that. And that's a huge part of, I think, of work. One of the beautiful things about work sometimes is teamwork and doing some common things, at least if you enjoy your job and enjoy your work.
Yeah, no, and that goes to even how they create the office spaces that are more like open concept now, so people aren't in cubicles, and you have that
Yeah.
like almost you're forced to kind of interact and have those
Yeah,
brainstorming sessions and things. Yeah.
I feel bad for the introverts of the world, right? To
Right.
take my cubicle away.
Exactly. Their safe space is gone.
Yeah. I mean, it's a real thing. If you're an introvert, you don't really want to talk to people all day at the office. You'd rather just, work a bit and have some, coffee chit chat, lunch chit chat. I think you're fine,
Right.
but all day long being in the bubble. Jessica, it's already an hour. I mean, already half hour. We're kind of at the time. A couple things. One is I've got up how people can find you. So
Right.
it's Jessica Langenham,
Right.
Langenhan,
Langenhan. Right.
on LinkedIn, and that's up on the thing. If you're listening, you can find her on LinkedIn. How about some closing thoughts or a closing message for people listening? Maybe especially parents, kids' parents, and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest thing, and kind of getting back to even, the thought what we were saying before in terms of like the stigma of mental health treatment and things, I
Mm,
really, and I think especially to kind of plug telehealth as well, is I think if there's ever kind of a doubt or a question of whether you're suffering something that might be helped by a therapist or by some medication or by
mm,
a coach or something,
right.
it doesn't hurt to reach out and just have that initial consultation or that initial touch point and get a professional's kind of opinion of where you are and kind of assess that and then make the recommendations for you. I think it's better to do, because I just have so many patients who've suffered for so many years before
Yes.
finally kind of taking that plunge. And again, with telehealth, it's a lot more accessible. You don't have to go into an office. You don't have to drive somewhere. You don't have to necessarily take time off work. It can be a
Yeah.
lot more kind of like private and not broadcasting to the world that you're seeing a therapist or a psychiatrist or whatever. But
Yes.
again, I think if there's a doubt, just reach out and get someone else's perspective on it and kind of at least kind of get you set on a path of what might be helpful for you rather than suffering in silence, basically. There's a statistic that people with OCD, I think it's something like there's a 12-year delay between when their symptoms come in and when they're like formally diagnosed. That's kind of like the average. I mean, OCD can be a very private thing that people are very embarrassed about. So I think that's one of
Yeah.
the extremes. But I mean, I don't know that it's necessarily a whole lot less sometimes for some people suffering depression or anxiety or ADHD.
Yeah, and I mean, I would just, echo kind of some of your comments there, which is just tell people listening, you're not alone. And whatever you're feeling or you're going through, there's a million people in front of you that have done it, have conquered it, have managed it, dealt with it. Go find someone to talk to and just find out if you do need help or how you can get help. There's nothing embarrassing. There's no shame. The only shame is not doing something now and getting help later and regretting waiting.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I've known so many people who are talking to therapists and are so happy they did. I mean, it's really changed their life. It's powerful having a chance to talk to someone who's got the tools to kind of help you figure it out yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a very good point. Like everyone has it within them to be able to recover and to heal from what it is. It's something that needs to be kind of like tapped into by someone else. That lid needs to be opened basically.
Absolutely, man. That's why you have coaches. I mean, it seems kind of silly, but coaches have coaches because, you need somebody else on the outside kind of looking in and holding up that mirror.
Exactly.
Kind of help you see things a little different angle.
Right.
Jessica, thanks so much for being a guest. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it was great. The time flew by.
I looked down, I was like, dang, okay. My day has been like this. It's been one fast 30 minutes after another. But it's really great. I mean, I'm glad to see the telehealth thing working so well.
Oh, I think you're on mute. Oh yeah, I still can't.
That unwinds everything.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah, I was just saying, I'm just really, I'm just pleased to see that telehealth has got such a powerful impact and, what a great tool. Unfortunate that COVID was the one that launched it into real widespread use. But as you said, that's the kind of the silver lining.
I mean, we have to take something good from those years, right?
That's a good one. I'll take that. Right. I'll take that. Again, Jessica, thanks so much for being a guest. Hang around for 30 seconds. I'm gonna run a commercial, then I'll see you on the other side.
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks everybody for listening to Mental Health Today and supporting it. You can find us on all the regular platforms, as well as YouTube, Facebook, and here on LinkedIn, where the show is also live. And then we'll have Jessica. We'll have an audio version of this out in a couple of weeks on the regular platforms. Okay. See you in a minute, and thanks everybody.
Yeah, loose, baby.
But we're about to go and make this vessel with these great professionals at Public Glass. We're not part of the community, but we're from the outer family of glassblowing. Yeah, we're gonna go make a magical giant jar with optic lenses so that if you turn it, it changes all the time. So if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.